Every leader has a strategy. Executing on that strategy is the challenge. If you want to learn how to effectively achieve what you've set out to accomplish, then this show is for you. Gain keen insights and listen in as leaders share their stories and challenges. SOAR Vision Group and the Baldrige Foundation welcome you to Leader Dialogue Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Leader Dialogue, brought to you by SOAR Vision Group and the Baldrige Foundation. I'm Duffie Dixon. Joining me is Jennifer Strahan. She is the Chief Operating Officer of SOAR Vision Group, and Lisa Council, who is the Chief Commercial Officer. We are joined again this week by Niki Buchanan. She is the General Manager of Population Insights and Care at Philips. And we had you last time, Niki, explain what population health is, because that was a new term for me. So explain that and what you do.
Sure. So population health management is kind of a way of thinking about treating patients. It's been gaining traction over the past 10 years, especially because of value-based care reimbursement. It really is, in its most simplest form, taking care of patients in their most natural setting, knowing that everyone has some condition in some way or will at some point in their life. In many ways, we treat them from the wellness side and prevention side all the way to managing chronic conditions or even post-surgical type visits. So looking for alternate ways other than just hospital visits and your once-a-year visits with your physician to create opportunities for affinity of their care with the patient and the provider.
So just a reminder for all of our listeners, but relative to what our discussion was last week, we talked about population health and how that really is a move towards consumerism in healthcare. And in particular, of course, that drives how are we meeting patients or consumers at whatever is most convenient for them, as opposed to it often being the other way around, which it has been for many, many years in healthcare. I even go back to thinking about house calls, for instance, that we used to have, which was really much more of a consumerism type model than what we have today. And of course, on the other side of that, though, that leads us to think about the business model practicality of being able to do that, right? It's a very different world from when that made sense, and it's a much more complicated world in the way that we're driving through change and thinking about what is convenient and allows us to be successful as an organization, whether the ones providing care, supporting organizations that provide care or not. But what's interesting to me is that you guys have a lot going on in your role. So what are some of the ways that you guys as an organization really prioritize your areas of focus so that you can be successful?
Well, I appreciate that question a lot. And I reflect in the changes of population health management, compare it often to what patients and providers went through when we evolved to electronic health records. All of those same practices that we had to deal with change management, from going from documenting on paper to documenting into an electronic system, all of those maturity things, those technology challenges, those adapting to different workflows, those minutes of, I've got to input this while the patient is right in front of me. How does that change the time I spend with them? All of those nuances have to be considered when you start to evolve to a different way of care. So we're right in the same circumstance with our providers and our community stakeholders that we were 10 years ago when we were adopting EMRs. We're having the same conversations again. And for those of us that have been in health IT, it feels like
my goodness,
everything comes around every 4 to 10 years again, right? So we're having to do all the change management stuff. We're having to do this is an IT investment, but it's also a people investment. It's also a change in workflow investment. It's a best practice investment. All of these nuances mean you actually have to have a staff and a team available to you that understands all those nuances, but also understands how they come together and how they feed each other. So I feel like I'm repeating things from the past, going through this again in this new setting, but at the same time, I feel like we learned a lot with that experience. And so if I can relate that back to our community providers, if I can relate that back to our health systems and say you need to treat it as a whole implementation, right? It's not a single faceted implementation, people, process, and technology. If we can have those conversations through the sales process, then we actually find the right partners that are ready for that type of change. And then inside our own organization, I actually have to manage a supply chain group, right? Because that's what's bringing the devices coming in and out for telehealth and extending the care to patients in the home. I have to manage the software side, which is different development cycles, right? Different routines of releases and upgrades. I have to manage our partners. So our partners are the EMR vendors out there, and they go through updates updates and system changes. I have to manage to the regulatory needs within the U.S. healthcare system environment, as well as our 13 other global markets that we help serve. So we have many different teams and many different departments, and ensuring that the message is the same and the vision is being executed all the way down to the individual worker is often one of our biggest challenges. We have to have many town halls every quarter. We have to have a lot of written communication, and at the same time we have to keep it simple, so that people, we're competing with for bandwidth in people's mind and mind share at our company all of the time, because Philips is amazing. It's the 13th most recognized brand in the world.
That's awesome.
But people think of us still as the light bulb company or the MRI company, right? All that great technology that went from light bulbs into ways of serving patients and monitoring and seeing, through imaging in an acute setting in a hospital. Now we're evolving all of that great technology to out of the hospital and ambulatory care. Getting that message through to our employees about why we're changing and why we're doing it is a constant challenge for us, because we're distributed across 13 markets.
Right. And SOAR Vision Group is all about that. When you go to leaderdialogue.com, you will see on that front page, we have the actual play-by-play book. It is the playbook, the template of what businesses need to do to be successful. And from the top is leadership, but at the bottom is all about getting it to the frontline workers.
Yes.
And that, I'm glad you said that is that is perhaps the biggest struggle, because that's what we've talked about. But that has to happen, right?
Absolutely. So if you think about, SOAR in a nutshell, is we're working through strategy execution, because it seems so simple, right? You just set a goal and you're like, just do it, right? It's not a big deal. Yeah. But when you have organizations that are thousands or tens of thousands of people, or sometimes even two, right? I mean, I think about like my household, me and my husband don't always get along. So there's a different perspective that you have to make sure your messaging is consistent. And that I love what you mentioned. It's simple and really it's repeatable. It's consistent in what you're doing as you're going all the way down, and that it's always connected and aligned. And I think there's an element to that becomes, even if you do those things right, if you're doing too much, it becomes lost in so much busyness that instead it's like the squirrel concept. You're just kind of going to the next thing, but you never really close anything.
Yep.
And I think that's very overwhelming for frontline team members.
I totally agree. The right amount of content at the right time may be different per team and per department, and really acknowledging that, and then making sure you have the right leaders, truly in all departments that are able to realize that. I've had leaders say to me, we've got Indian development teams as an example, and when they are on holiday, they are on a massive holiday for many weeks at a time. We are not going to deliver a key change in our message or branding during those times of the year, right? So having the brave cultural response to understand your employees and what they are managing to, and then making sure we're still all coordinated in our messages, it can be very challenging for sure. And we service customers over in Australia. There's a 14-hour time difference. So sometimes I'm doing my town halls at 10 o'clock at night in order to meet the time and the time frame, because they still want to hear it directly from me often, but I also want my management team to feel empowered to be able to deliver those messages as well. And then there's another aspect of this too. What do your customers say about you? Right? Again, 146-year-old company. We've evolved many times. We've gone all into healthcare in the past 10 years. But if you talk to somebody who's known us from 15 years ago, they can't help but start with, they used to be the lighting company, because that's their first memory of us.
Right.
It is our goal for our CEO that in the next 10 years, there almost won't be a recollection of that, simply because they want to be known as the healthcare tech company. So that's a big rebranding initiative. And so I ask all our customers all the time, because they use many facets of Philips. They use many different groups and consumer-driven, parts of Philips. So I ask them all the time, what do you say when you say you're partnered with Philips? What is it that you describe us? How do you describe us? And I will tell you that is where we are the most challenged, because depending on who they work with, depending on which products they've bought from us or what their patients use, they may have a very different view. Some of them may not even use the term pop health, which makes me cry because I hope they know that about us.
Right.
But that's part of the job, and that's why there's a constant challenge in adaptability that we need to be able to provide to the customer.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, when we talk about Philips, light bulbs did not come to my mind first.
Great.
Healthcare actually did, and whenever you guys said light bulbs, I'm like, oh yeah.
Oh, we're getting close.
Working, right?
You young
Yes.
thing, you.
Yes.
Well,
Thank you. Thank you.
imaging is always what I think of, but I
Yes.
think a broader audience would
Yep.
say
Yes.
the lighting
No, I think that's
industry for
true.
sure.
Yep.
So when you look at that overarching strategy and you've got lots of components that go to that, what's kind of a practical mechanism that you utilize with your teams, Niki?
Yeah. So my team, because of the expertise in pop health in the U.S. healthcare market, they are often pulled into other sales discussions across the business. Keep in mind, we also sell Norelco. We also sell, the toothbrushes that are very popular, electronic. So there's Sonicare. There's all these things that we do. So keeping my team focused on our message and our brand and what we're delivering to benefit healthcare it is challenging. So we agree at the beginning of every year, and then we monitor it every quarter to 3 main goals that we can support. And if anything comes at us as a request for our time, our money, our department focus, our engineers, or our supply chain people, if any of those come in and they don't match the 3 or influence the 3, then I ask them, I enable them to actually say no, and I tell them that I will support them in the no, because sometimes in a big hierarchical organization, it can keep on going up to another level, and then I can get a phone call. My only request, of course, is that they tell me that they said no, so that I'm prepared to support them. But I've found that that's not realistic. 3 is really not what we can do. There's a lot more time that we have to invest, and so we end up having other things that still fall on us. But the message is stay focused, deliver to your outcomes and your objectives, deliver to them on a quarterly basis. If we can't break them down in a quarter, then maybe the goal is actually too big and we're striving too hard. Or it's also a good way for us to say, I'm getting asked to do so many other things outside of those 3 goals, then maybe we as a team haven't agreed on the right goals.
Right. Constant evaluation.
Which is why we try to, we do our big strategic goals every year. Philips does the strategic plan of record every 3 years, and that is where all groups like myself have to input our data, input our obligation to the market, what we're going to deliver, what revenue we're going to bring, how far we forecast our ordering of equipment, etc., well in advance, but then we check it every year, and then we check it down to every quarter. And then, of course, just from a daily management perspective, I've got a team who I meet with every Monday, hour and a half. It's sacred time. Everyone's expected to be there. If we have conflicts in travel, whatever it may be, then we actually make the meeting earlier, because that's my one request. Travel afternoon on Monday so that you can make our leadership meeting, because I will share the above level Philips requirements, and I will share what our business is dealing with.
How important is it to you that meeting be everyone in person?
We are a distributed team, so that's not feasible for us.
Okay.
Those that live in the Atlanta area are absolutely in the office for it, but we enable Skype. We use video technology. We do want to see each other, and we want to see each other's reactions to big news. And I do feel like it makes the team feel closer as well. But there's honestly just some times where they're in a hotel and the remote connection is not going to work, and so they're not on video that day. They have their funny picture up instead. But it's ensuring the communication and ensuring we're all striving towards the right goals. Every now and then the market will tell us the goals are wrong. And that actually happened to us last year. It's okay if I share a little story.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we love those.
We were 100% focused on bringing telehealth, bringing the cost of telehealth down for our business so that we could pass that lower cost down to our customers. That was the one complaint we had in 2017, was it had gotten too expensive. And so while they were seeing the outcomes with patients that they were expecting, in order to order more devices and put those on demand meant that they were having to pre-order and spend and costs up front that they weren't necessarily getting reimbursed for in time. So we looked at our strategy last year, because this was becoming a common complaint when we were getting to renewals. And I said, maybe the market is telling us that we're not buying enough in bulk ahead of
That's
time.
right.
We're Philips. We should be able to make a bigger investment if that reduces.
To bring the price down.
That's right. That brings the price down. So I had to go to our executive team and say, we've got a problem. What I asked for in our spend is slightly less than what I need, but it's going to benefit the customer in the long run, and it's going to get the renewals that we did not expect to get this year because we've reduced the cost. And so as long as you can give the full story and, make that call, but that was not something we went into 2019 or 2018 expecting at all. And it really did, cause us to pause a little bit and think about, how do we avoid this next year? And what are the things we're not even thinking about now that we should be thinking about that we may have to make additional requests on? So, that only comes with experience and time and working together as a team. But if you're listening to the distractors of your 3 objectives, then you find they tell you what to do next. Right. They point you in a different direction.
One of the things I love is what you're talking about, and again, relating this back to our hierarchy, is if you notice the foundation, which is intentional in that hierarchy, is colleague engagement, which means they have to know what to work on, and then we have to be able to support them to be able to do it well, right? Yes. Saying no is a huge thing that we often talk about, but we don't really empower people to do it because it's hard to say no to good ideas. And so this aligns in a lot of ways with a book that we have referenced a lot, which is Great at Work with Morton Hansen. And so in the midst of this, that allows you to, he talks about how do you do less than obsess, right? So organizations and people who go through the process just doing a lot and staying very busy, they might be busy, but they're not necessarily getting results because you're doing too much to be able to really do anything well. And I love that that's kind of the messaging of what you do. And by empowering people to say no, it allows you to really take advantage of right in between customer value and colleague engagement, and that hierarchy is organizational effectiveness. So it's intentionally sandwiched between that, because if you don't create a structure and an operating model that supports it, you're going to create very frustrated staff, and then you're going to create very frustrated customers. So
Absolutely.
It also builds into listening to that voice of customer, which you guys have done so well.
Yeah, we have a customer advisory council. And we meet with them 4 times a year to get their input. And, that is another thing. It's another opportunity for us to say, we need you to know where we've pivoted. We need you to hear what our top 3 things are. We need you to know where we hope to be in 3 years. When you're really candid with your customers, especially if they're in a state of change, they're in a state of flux, it really does help neutralize difficult conversations. So, we have had customers who have said to us, we are probably not going to be able to continue in partnership together anymore because you've shared your vision. We've got our objectives, and we see they're actually going 2 different ways, but it doesn't mean we don't get along and we wouldn't reference each other in the future. So you end up actually amicably separating, but you do it in a way that you can explain it. They have a message that they can tell other customers still, and they'll still often be a reference, which is shocking, right? Yes, we used to use them. Why are you telling me about your former usage? Well, because they were transparent with us, and they told us they're not going to be aligned to our message anymore. That is a trustworthy organization for you to partner with, and that's why we're comfortable referencing them. That, to me, is the epitome of a strong customer partnership relationship. But it's also a challenge, right, to be honest and to be bold and to say, Philips sees us going in this direction this year and maybe slightly different than what we originally contracted with you for. But I feel like it neutralizes conversations. And if we could do that more in business, we would actually have long-term partnerships evolve over time in a much more healthy way.
Absolutely.
One of the things that we've talked about with some of our recent CEO innovation councils was that connection point in the critical alignment between strategy as well as your operating mechanisms and then structural integration, because your strategy gives you your direction, right? And your operating mechanisms really enable an agile organization to respond to that direction and or market changes. But at the same time, you have to have a level of stability, which comes from that structural integration, to make sure that you're staying grounded in what it is that you should be, so that you're not responding to everything. Because if you're just responding with direction without any kind of structure, then that becomes, again, that squirrel mentality. Versus if you're just constantly going through anything, you just have a strategy, but you don't have the operating mechanisms and the structure to support it. It's just wishful thinking. So it really does require the alignment of all 3 of those things to be able to do it. But I think they're all hard, and I think different organizations struggle with different aspects of those. Can you
fair.
speak to maybe if you guys have had any kind of struggles on more than one than the other?
Oh, sure. So, Philips across North America has many different divisions, right? We've got monitoring, we've got the consumer business, we've got many different ways that we're pulled as leaders to meet the business demand of our customer. We have strategic account management across the entire, North American teams. And often what those North American teams are trying to pitch for future discussions may actually contradict our message in Pop Health. So, for example, many institutions are looking for ways to increase their fee for service, right? Because that's how they're getting paid. We are in direct contrast with that when trying to bring Pop Health strategies to a business to say you should be paying your physicians on quality and how they're monitoring their patients, not if they're having repeated visits with patients because they weren't monitoring them over time. So, we have these direct internal conflicts that we have to often resolve. And we'll often walk into sometimes a shared meeting with a customer and almost display two different messages and have to, as leaders, acknowledge that we've done so and try to bring it back, right? Try to bring it back to, we're still all in this together, right, as an organization. But then you also have to think, how did we let this happen in front of a customer? We need to go back and actually do better at pre-planning. We need to go back and get better at aligning our messages even when they slightly contradict, because there is room for both a fee-for-service reimbursement financial model as well as taking on value-based care. But do you understand the organization you're working with in order to do so? So we'll have internal sales conflicts, internal account management conflicts, and then of course there's always internal delivery and operational conflicts as well, because what if an MRI machine is going to be delayed for, let's say, 3 months because tariffs in China have impacted the import? But yet we're in the middle of doing a telehealth implementation. We're going to be on site talking to those clinicians, and we're going to be hearing the gripes of what's happening because of that delay. Is everyone on the team aware of our internal large organization scalability challenge right now? And are they delivering the same message? So for us, it's a lot of different focus areas getting distributed over a large employee base, and then not having the consistent message to the customer, or even us leaders walking into it ourselves sometimes. But as long as you're honest and candid with the customer, you can resolve a lot of that. But pre-planning to enable that our messages don't contradict is an area that we can all grow in across any type of large organization like Philips.
It reminds me a lot of what a lot of our hospitals talk about today, is having kind of a foot in two canoes, right?
Yes.
So you've got your fee-for-service, and then you've
pay for performance.
Exactly, pay for performance. And I think I've shared this before, but the analogy that comes to mind, the story that comes to mind, was with Amazon. Whenever they decided to do Prime, for instance, they knew that they were going to take a hit in their financials because of obviously
Free
the
shipping.
savings that it's great for, I'm excited about it, but at the same time it was a struggle for a business, and they had to decide. Again, it's that tug, exactly as you're referencing, where it might be that we're going to take kind of a short-term hit for a long-term gain, but that's hard in healthcare, and I think we see that, and I would imagine that's a struggle you guys encounter in trying to create that common vision with your clients or customers.
Absolutely, and you just hit on another one. We all have different regulatory requirements depending on our business as well. So something that seems so simple, right? The deployment in a dental practice of the Sonicare toothbrushes, right? If a governmental regulation prevents that from happening in any way, when I walk into that practice, they still see me as the Philips representative. I have nothing to do with the consumer side of the
Do you
business.
need to get a T-shirt? I am not in the toothbrush division.
But she represents.
But I
Philips, right?
represent
They
the
don't care
brand.
to the
I
customer.
represent
That's
the
right.
brand and the name. So
Yeah.
that happens for all of the business leaders across Philips. We oh, she's the Pop Health girl. Don't
Yeah.
talk about reimbursement
Yeah.
with her. She'll get really defensive about her business. But yes, so we absolutely see that that those challenges happen all the time.
Well, and from our audience perspective, we talk about Baldrige, and again, consumerism, colleague engagement, leadership. It's kind of expanded with the larger Philips. Your challenges
Yes.
You also bring some experience in Lean Six Sigma to the table. Yeah. Have you been able to leverage that with
definitely.
your teams? And again, we believe that the Baldrige framework is so successful, whether you're a small business, medium-sized business, large business. Again, it's an operating system. Yes. We'd love to hear how you may not be on the Baldrige journey, right. But what have you done that's very similar to that operating?
Yeah, fair question. And, this is one of the things I love so much about Philips as an organization. They require that all of their leaders have some form of Lean Six Sigma, yellow belt, green belt, whatever it may be, to be in a leadership role. That is a wonderful thing if you think about it, because it does, again, neutralize our objectives, right? It neutralizes us to know that we all have a certain foundation and understanding on how to run things, whether it be a business or just a department. Another thing I love about Philips is they have always had a business transformation team. And there are times, like I described to you back in 2018, where we saw the cost of our, supplies outweighing what contracts could actually support. So I, touched base with the business transformation team to say, hey, give us a different way to look at this. We'll open our books, we'll share everything we can, but come in and give us some really good suggestions. It can't always just be change the price, right? There's got to be other things that we could have been doing to prevent this or see this coming. And so they enable a business transformation person to come in and actually evaluate. So then you end up, walking through and documenting, here's our current state. Well, anytime you document your current state and share it with everyone, somebody in the room says that's not your current state.
That's right. There's not unanimous agreement.
There's and then you strive for consensus, right? And then you strive for, okay, what should be the future state? What should be the current state? Let's strive to get there. And wow, now we see our gaps. Now we see our opportunities for improvement. We may agree that there's no way we can improve them this quarter, but we can put a plan in place to do it over 6, 9, 12 months. So, it's that kind of, if you can be honest and transparent within your business practice and then enable people who can solely focus on that single problem or challenge, because I don't have time as the general manager, managing different groups.
Right.
I can't focus that, even though I'd love to. I'd love to get into the details. It's so great to have someone who's trained to be able to come in and do that.
That is huge. That is huge in business, because that means, first of all, there's trust.
That's right. That's right.
And on your part, there is transparency and, I guess I would say, confidence that you don't worry about a fresh set of eyes.
Right.
Because in the back of your mind, it's going to benefit everyone.
Yes.
And that is a big ask for leaders, because we've talked about leaders who don't want to delegate. They don't want anyone looking in with a microscope. They don't want to be questioned on their decisions. And that can be deadly to the whole operation. So that's huge.
Right. And just for our listeners, as a reminder, when we talk about Lean Six Sigma, that really is a problem-solving methodology that allows people to look at whatever type of problem, right? It doesn't have to be a process. It can be a process. It can be other things that are more analytical, or anything that is a challenge for an organization or at home, right?
Yeah.
In the midst of it. And
She
it
brings out
allows
that-
you.
she brings out
I
that
know,
belt all
because
the time.
it's practical. So in the midst of it, though, it's what is the problem solving we can do to improve our quality and our efficiency to bring maximum value to our customers. And that's what it drives from. And so, but Duffie, you mentioned such a critical point, which is it's not just about someone coming in and feeling like they're being policed, right? It's got to be, because
it's a partnership.
Yeah. Anytime you're looking at a process or a division, somebody put that in play. So someone's going in calling someone's baby ugly, and that is hard to deal with. So you have to make sure that in the midst of that we're doing it in a way that really brings it together and saying, hey, how do we build on what we've done, but also not be stuck where we're at.
Yeah.
Right. And the common goal. The common goal is that it's better on the other
More
side.
efficiency,
Yeah, more
right.
efficient. Yeah.
Yes, the outcome is improved because of the transparency and the openness and the coaching. I mean, it's professional coaching.
Right. It goes back to the premise of culture and how important that is for any organization. And that's so much more difficult to manage and align in large organizations, especially mergers and companies that have come together from very different cultures, and how they start to come together as a unified company.
And globally. I mean, that's just huge.
Yes,
If people didn't listen to last week's podcast, I really want you to, because this is a woman who is dealing with people across the globe, not only different time zones, but different cultures, and how they look at healthcare and what's important to them. I mean, that is just I really worry for your sanity. As the years go on, your brain may just explode. But really, that is just a whole new perspective. And going to the World Health Organization, that's the top of the chain. That really is. It's very, very impressive.
Well, thank you.
So just to wrap up some of the discussions, because this time always just flies by, but obviously very much appreciate you being able to share your wisdom with us, and hopefully your brain doesn't explode quite yet, because we have a little bit more to get from there.
We're going to need that for a while. You just hold on to it.
But in the midst of that, thinking about how population health really is a driver towards consumerism, but in order to actually get there, you have to be able to engage and align your colleagues, your employees, and respond quickly to your customers. And being able to do that, there's all of those different elements that are challenges for businesses to overcome. But the good news is that there are ways to do it. So that's an exciting time for us.
Niki, thank you.
This has been so fun.
Yeah, it's
Thank
been
you.
great. And so we want you to keep in track with what we're doing. Again, Jennifer mentioned that we have a rural health CEO roundtable that's coming up in November, and we almost have our entire slots filled, which is super exciting. Again, we think also kind of bringing healthcare where you are is mission critical, and we really are trying to partner with those health systems who want to remain independent and not get gobbled up by the large urban hospitals, and really deliver care. And those physicians who know that generation of a family, I think, is super important. So thank you for all the hard work that you're doing. We'd love to partner with you in the future, and maybe even have you on our speaking circuit and bring you into one of our events. So thank you again for participating.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
If she's speaking, I'm coming. 'Cause she's fun. Yeah.
I
I say every time we do this, we need to bring him back. We need to bring her back. I'm compiling a list, just so you guys know. Thank you so much. Also, thank you so much to our listeners for joining us on Leader Dialogue, brought to you by the SOAR Vision Group and the Baldrige Foundation. Remember, you can listen to a live show every Friday, 1 o'clock Eastern Time. I'm not going to ask you what that would be in Australia. I can't do the math. You can also visit businessradiox.com, click on the Gwinnett Studio, and select our show titled Leader Dialogue, or you can also go to leaderdialogue.com/podcast. On behalf of Jennifer, Lisa, and our producers Trey and Mike, I'm Duffie Dixon. Join us next time on Leader Dialogue here on Business Radio X.